Hello everybody, here we are with another lens review, the Sony FE 16-35mm f4G Power Zoom. Announced in March 2022, the 16-35 is a lens that manages to attract both stills and video shooters, thanks to its excellent image quality, fast and accurate focusing, reasonable price and most importantly, power zoom capabilities. This is a G-class lens which is placed one level below the Sony's GM class. I can say that the build quality feels top-notch. The 16-35 is a weather-sealed lens like all the G-class lenses, and the sealing is not limited to the lens mount gasket. As this illustration shows, there are no less than 12 locations that are sealed against moisture and dust. In addition, this is an internal zoom lens, so the length of the lens doesn't change during zooming in and out, which also helps to minimize the number of potential areas that water and dust can penetrate inside the lens. It only weighs 353 grams and has a length of 88 mm. In comparison, the Zeiss 16-35mm f4 weighs 518 grams and is 99 mm long. On the other hand, Sony's 16-35mm f2.8 GM Mark II is 547 grams and 112 mm long. Everything seems well for the 16-35 when compared to similar full-frame lenses. But what if we compare it to an APS-C lens with similar focal length? Here you can see how it compares to Sony's other ultra-wide-angle zoom lens with power zoom capabilities, the Sony E 10-20mm f4G power zoom lens. That lens has the full-frame equivalent of 15-30mm, but look at how much smaller and lighter it is. The 16-35 has an aperture ring on the body. If you set it to A position, you will control the aperture from the camera body instead. The iris lock switch locks the ring in this position so it doesn't rotate by accident. The click on-off button engages and disengages the aperture ring click stops. When it is set to off position, the aperture ring moves smoothly and quietly, providing seamless and silent control ideal for video shooting. The AF/MF button makes it convenient to change between these modes without using a camera shortcut button or delve into menus. The programmable button on the lens can be programmed to execute almost any function. I set it to focus hold. This is a zoom-by-wire lens. The zoom ring is not directly connected to the zoom mechanism, but it simulates an actual zoom ring action quite realistically. It is very light and you can operate with the tip of your finger very easily. There is also a zoom rocker switch on the lens that lets you accurately, and more importantly, very consistently operate the zoom action. There is no way you can replicate what this switch does with a zoom ring. I generally set the standby speed to 6 and recording speed to 3. The total zoom range of the lens can be set from the camera menus and there are 3 options. First option is to use the optical zoom only. Second option is the clear image zoom. This mode adds a 1.5 times digital zoom without any noticeable image degradation, making this practically an 53mm lens on the tele end for video. Third option is to use the digital zoom, which can zoom the lens all the way to 4 times, which corresponds to 140mm on this lens. But the image quality gets a big hit in this mode as expected. Another way to zoom this lens is to use a camera body with a zoom rocker, such as the Sony FX3, FX30, ZV-E1 or ZV-E10. One of the best ways to operate the zoom on this lens, in my opinion, is to use the Sony RMT P1BT wireless remote commander. This method has the added benefit of zooming in and out without touching the camera, thus eliminating the potential vibrations and motion during filming. The zoom can also be operated remotely using the Sony GP-VPT2 Bluetooth wireless shooting grip, great for vlogging scenarios. And finally, the zoom can be controlled remotely from Sony's Creator app for iOS and Android mobile devices. I don't find the app control on Sony cameras reliable in general, but it's a good alternative if you don't have the remote. For the power zoom, Sony uses 4 XT linear motors that are typically used for focusing. Zooming is totally silent aside from the slight friction sound when the zoom ring is used. Due to its short zoom range, I had no problems using this power zoom for still shooting either. One minor issue I had though is that you can't see what focal length the lens is at any time, unless you look at the camera screen, since there are no focal range marks on the lens. This is not actually an issue specific to this lens, but is due to the nature of power zoom lenses. The focusing is also by wire, it has a linear response and is extremely smooth and accurate. The focus ring is at the most front part of the lens and is partially blocked when the lens hood is reverse attached. Speaking of the lens hood, the petal-shaped plastic hood is very small thanks to the ultra-wide angle view of the lens. It can be reverse attached for storage. The replacement of this hood costs $40. The 16 to 35 mm uses 2XT linear motor for focusing. Autofocusing is very fast, responsive and accurate as in almost all recent Sony lenses. The lens provides max magnification at tele-end, which is an advantage over the lenses that provides this at wide-end. The minimum focusing distance at 35 mm is 0.24 meter, and the max magnification at this distance is 0.23x. It is nothing to write home about, but not bad either. Focus breathing is extremely well controlled at both 16mm and 35mm, a great feature for a video-oriented lens. This lens is extremely sharp starting from f4 throughout the focal range, but especially at 16mm. It gets better at f5.6 and f8, but I didn't feel the need to stop down in most scenarios. Here you can see there's not much difference between f4 and f8 at 16mm because at f4 it's already very good. I was even more impressed when I compared this lens to Sony's 24-70mm f2.8 GM2 lens. At 24mm f4, the 16-35 lens is as good as the GM lens. Chromatic aberrations are very well controlled and not distracting in real-life scenarios, unless you crop heavily. When the lens profiles are disabled, you can see strong distortion at 16mm, but they are effectively fixed once enabled. Likewise, the vignetting is fixed by lens profiles, so it never becomes an issue. Here is an example of how the sunburst comes out in various apertures. Lens flares and ghostings are very rare, but they definitely show up in extreme conditions such as this one. The 16-35mm easily became one of my favorite lenses in E-mount. I am not a big wide-angle shooter, but this lens proved to be so useful with the power zoom capability and excellent image quality at all focal lengths. It's also compact and lightweight for a full-frame lens, which gives me another reason to take it with me when I go out for shooting. Here I have a summary of all the pros and cons that I have experienced during my review. And here are the 4 potential alternatives in Sony's E-mount. Please share your thoughts and questions about this lens in the comments section. And if you have found this review helpful, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. This gives us the motivation to come up with more camera and lens reviews.